Hi, this is podcast at home in the States, and my name is Julie, and I welcome you. I welcome everyone who is interested in the Czech culture, Czech language, Czech heritage in the US. Today we will talk a lot about immigration, about the stories of families who cross the Atlantic Ocean. If you don't follow my sites yet, please do it. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Patreon. I will put the link down here so you can join me and you can comment, you can like here, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Well, welcome again. And I would like to welcome today my guest, CJ Svagera. Hello.
Hello,
CJ, where are you? Where am I calling to today?
I'm from Papillion, Nebraska.
Wonderful. And your last name, Svagera, I'm pronouncing it the English way, but tell me the real original Czech name.
Um, so the Czech pronunciation would be Svagera, um, and in English, if I'm lucky, I get Svagera, and if I'm not lucky, I get any combination of. I usually raise my hand, and yes, that's me.
It's
Since
it's
the
one of the it's one of the difficult last names around, right?
yes, the SV does not occur naturally in the English language, so it throws everybody off.
Yes. Well, but you are in a region that has a lot of other Czech last names. Can you tell me a little more about the region where you are from?
Yes, per capita, Nebraska has more Czech descendants than any other state in the United States. Texas has a few more because it's a bigger state, but per capita numbers, Nebraska has the highest number of Czech descendants in the whole United States.
And actually, how big is Nebraska? How many people live in Nebraska?
Roughly about 2.5 million people.
2.5 million. Alrighty. So I was guessing it's actually similar to the Czech Republic, but then it's not. It's actually much less, actually.
Yes, much less. The Czech Republic can actually fit into the state of Nebraska physically, size wise, but the Czech Republic has a whole lot more people condensed in a smaller area than Nebraska.
And I've never been to Nebraska, but of course, like being interested in the Czech/Bohemian history in the United States, I know, same like what you mentioned, it's a state where the Czech culture or the knowledge of like Czech people or Bohemian people is like, very common. But I think we need to explain, or I would like to get your point of view since you are one of the people living there and probably explaining sometimes to the rest of the people. How do you how do you consider yourself? Like, do you guys still use the word Bohemian a little more, or like do you consider do you consider as the descendants of Czechs? How do you work with the terms?
I personally prefer Czech descent. Uh, my family is very proud of its Moravian ancestry. Um, Not that we're not friendly with Bohemians, but we prefer we're from Czech descent, and that kind of encapsulates everything. Then, both Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia, everything.
Okay, great. And actually, because that's only my perception from when I'm like reading sometimes books or, Facebook posts, like that it's very common still just to use the word of Bohemians. So do you still hear it a lot too? And why do you think it's like that?
Um, yes, I think that Bohemians is still dominant, predominant as the predominant place. Um, I think that just over the last century and a half, probably, people got labeled as Bohemians, especially before a lot of the Czechs that immigrated to the Nebraska, Texas, South Dakota, Great Plains area here came in the 1870s to 1910, and at that time there was no country known as Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, anything. They were labeled as Austrian citizens of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, or they were labeled as Bohemians. And so I think that's where the Bohemian stuck, is that everybody got labeled as Bohemian if you claimed that you were from that area of the Austrian Empire.
Absolutely. And when I got when I saw your post on Facebook, that's how I basically learned about you and your writing, because I need to explain, like, you write about your Czech descent, you publish stories that talk about your great grandfather and great mother and then grandfather, and they're all from different perspectives of different generations of immigrants.
Yes.
And I think so many people can relate to those stories. So I would like to talk about your specific family story. So, and I know your mom's side or grandma's side and grandpa's side, they're both from the Czech, descents, but differently. So, pick one story that you want to start with. How did you guys get from the Austrian-Hungarian Empire to United States?
My great grandfather, Jan Svagera, was born and raised in Roketnice, which is what today we'd call a suburb of Vsetín in Moravian Valašsko, the Valašsko area. And the Svagera family goes back at least 500 years in that area that I've been able to trace. And having been born in 1890, at 18 in 1908, he was conscripted into the Austrian-Hungarian army and was forced to report for what we'd call probably National Guard duty in this country. And every month he had to report for a number of days for training. And after 4 years of doing this, he was simply tired of it. He had no use for the Austrian control, Austrian oversight. He didn't want to fight for them. And I think that both he and his mother saw that war was on the horizon in 1912, that there's a lot of political unrest. And he knew that conscientiously he could not fight for a kingdom or an army that he didn't believe in the cause. So prior to his mandatory reporting date in August of 1912, he fled on foot or horseback, we're not quite sure, fled north out of Moravia towards Bremen, Germany. And he got to the port in Bremen, Germany, and by then had been found out that he had missed his check-in. And the authorities, there was basically he was a wanted man, and the authorities were looking for him at the port. And the announcement was going out over the loudspeaker, Jan Svagera, please report to police station. And fortunately for him, there was a Jewish family with children about his age that was also waiting to board the ship for America. And he de facto became one of their sons in order to get on the ship, and was able to get on the ship without being caught. And the ship then took him to Galveston, Texas, where, from my understanding, he had already made contacts before, because at that time there was posters that went out over the Czech lands, all over the Austrian Empire, really, in Poland and Slovakia, and that, there's good farmland in America, and, Czechs should immigrate because there is good opportunities in America.
Yes.
And I'm sure that he had seen one of those posters, and he had made some contacts, because as soon as he got off the ship, he made his way to a town of Holland, Texas, which at that time had a large Czech population.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, he joined a farming crew and farmed his way north through Oklahoma, Kansas, and ended up in Nebraska. And he made his home in Nebraska for a few years then.
Which of course, that was the time when you still didn't need any visa, or there were no really anything, like any really rules to get to US, because like US needed a lot of immigrants back then, so they were
Correct.
opening the doors, right?
I do have his passport. He did have a passport, and I have that in my collection. But like you say, you didn't need any visa. If he was willing to come and assimilate and work, then he was more than welcome, from what I imagine at that time. And then, as we know from history, war broke out in Europe in 1914, and by 1917, the United States had joined the war effort in Europe. And he did apply to fight for the United States Army. He wanted to go back and fight the Austrian forces that he despised. And because he was not a citizen and he had poor eyesight, he was declined from joining the U.S. Army. But there was a group of like-minded Czech immigrants that also wanted to join and create a force to go back and fight. And it was known as the Czechoslovak Foreign Legion. And interesting connection, they were actually trained and funded by Gutzon Borglum, who some U.S. people will know is the man who carved Mount Rushmore.
Oh, I was gonna ask you. I don't know that name. Okay.
Yes, he was the sculptor who carved Mount Rushmore and also Stone Mountain in Georgia. So very famous U.S.-based sculptor, and they hosted the Foreign Legion at their home to train in Stamford, Connecticut, which is where my great-grandfather ended up. And so he personally knew Borglum, which is kind of an interesting side note. And also side note is that Borglum's wife and some of her friends were the ones that sewed the first Czechoslovak flags that were used. So the first Czechoslovak flags that were flown in Prague in 1918 were actually sewn and created in this country, in the United States.
That is a cool fact. Thank you.
So there's a lot going on in Philadelphia and Connecticut and all over the United States to help for Czech independence. And
yes,
so,
it was led by the first Czech president, of course, like who was
yeah, of
touring
course,
and living in the
Masaryk,
US.
whose wife was also American. So a lot of connections there.
Yes.
But so he was able to go back. He made it to Europe, and he fought for about a year in France as part of the Foreign Legion. The Allies won the war, and he actually made his way across Europe. I'm very jealous. He took a European vacation. We had postcards from Venice and Munich and Romania and all these places that he went to in 1918, 1919, and places that I can only dream of today. But
Yeah.
he was quite the traveler back then. But he went back home to Velasco in 1919, and stayed for about a year. And I suppose that having been in the United States for 5 years previously, that there was some kind of pull. And so he left home once again, never to return in 1920, and made his way back to Omaha, Nebraska, where there was a young woman that he had his heart set on, and they married, and 5 years. They had 5 children, which their firstborn was my grandfather. So,
Wow. So also, like, if if people who've never been to Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic and they don't know the term of Valašsko, that's a region that is in the mountain areas, and
yes.
it used to be like very poor area. People wouldn't have too much space to have good fields because it was very like mountainy. It's cold there, so
Mhm.
no wonder that probably after coming from America where he saw like already many more opportunities, that no wonder that he actually went back. Like, do you have any notes that he would leave, or where do you know all these things from actually, because we are talking about the beginning of of last century.
Yes. Fortunately, my great grandparents were great keepers of artifacts. What they probably considered ordinary, everyday things, but they kept boxes and boxes of letters, of pictures, of all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And those were passed down to my grandfather and my great aunt, and now they've been passed down to me. And I have a whole treasure trove of
Mm-hmm.
information. Um,
You
my
go
great,
through.
yes, my great grandfather was the oldest of, I believe, 6 children, and he left behind 4 sisters and 1 brother. And so there is at least 40 years of letters that were sent back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I only have one side, but I have a treasury of letters that were received from uh, setting the Velasco area from his sisters, telling of things that were happening from 1912 to 1948.
That is wonderful. That's a great source for historians, actually, if you think about it.
Hmm.
Because those years, a lot was going on, not only in Europe in general, but even in that Valašsko region. It's, in the areas on the border with Slovakia, lots of like partisans were there during the Second World War. And then after the communists took over, like, all those farms, they were actually taken by the state and so on. Do you actually, is your Czech good enough to go through those letters and read? Because I know you studied Czech.
Yes, I my reading ability is fairly high, and so it can be tedious, but I am able to go back and read them. Um, in today's digital age, we rely on, or we're used to having everything printed on a
Yeah.
computer screen. And so the hardest part is not necessarily Czech, but it's deciphering old handwriting,
True, true.
and sometimes handwriting that wasn't very good. So, um, but yeah, it's just when I have some extra free time, I will take a letter or two out of the box and just read, and it's fascinating just from the everyday facts of what the prices of
Hmm.
milk and grain were to things that were going on in the world around them to the family's health and well-being, and just everything was included in these letters.
Yeah, yeah. Um, your grandfather, was one of those people who probably, like many of us immigrants here, live in between those two worlds, like, their whole life, right? Like, even though, like, through the letters, he still tried to keep in touch with the family, although here in the US, like he was in completely different situation, that the society expecting him to be the real American and to assimilate. And you work with that topic a lot in your writing, actually, on your blog.
I do.
And I want to move now to the blog that I read and I really liked. So I
Mhm.
want to ask you more actually about your grandpa, meaning this Jan Svagera's son,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So what was your grandpa's name?
Um, his birth name was Charles, but he always went by Charlie.
Okay.
And I found in old family correspondence that the name that his father referred to him though was Karlichku.
Yeah,
So
of course.
there was still that little Czech that he couldn't let go. It was, you know, his oldest son was his Karlichku.
Of course,
And
Karliček.
um so, you know, there's just that blend that you can't let go between the old world and the new world, and as much as you try and assimilate, there's still the most personal, the closest things to you are still in your mother tongue.
Absolutely. And I want to now quote a little piece from your piece
Hmm.
uh, that's called "The Language That Never Left Him, Words We Learn Before We Know We Are Learning." And let's go. Like many children born into immigrant families across the Midwest in the early 20th century, Grandpa grew up living between two worlds at once. His mother was Czech American, raised in Nebraska and South Dakota, but deeply rooted in Czech culture. His father was a Czech immigrant who had carried his homeland, his customs, and his language across an ocean into the plains of Nebraska. That's the Jan Svagera that we just talked
Yes.
about. And you write also, it was the language of supper table conversations. We speak about Czech, the language of correction and comfort, the language of stories and laughter, the language of friends, prayers, and daily life. But then came kindergarten for your grandpa.
Yes.
So go on. What happened to the Czech in the household after? Because as you were describing, this was the regular language of his lives until he was like 5 years old.
Hmm. Yeah, he went to kindergarten in a small rural country school in Nebraska, and probably for the first time in his life came to the realization that he didn't understand anything because he
Mm-hmm.
only knew Czech. They even, at that time, the area that they lived in was even called Bohemian Town. So I'm sure even trailing along with his mother or going to the grocery store or any number of things between 0 and 5, they did everything in Bohemian Town,
Mm-hmm.
and predominantly it was Czech. And so that's all he would have known. But when my great grandfather found out that his son didn't fit in at school, he made the ultimatum decision that there would be no more Czech spoken in the household because there was another baby um, at home, and I'm sure they had plans to have more children, and which they ultimately did. But he was insistent that they were going to assimilate; they were going to be American because he knew that that was the only way they could survive.
Mm-hmm.
There was no other
Because
choice.
yeah, I'm sure that other children who, only spoke English, like probably he wouldn't be able to find friends. And back then also there was this pressure on the immigrants, right, to be part of the society as quickly as possible. And
Yes.
I also like your one of your notes here that you said they like it's so true. Like nowadays life is so different. The state school system and the private schools too. They always offer like very much language support. Even if you come and you don't speak no English, they really place you in the classrooms where they give you extra English classes and so
Hmm.
on, right? You're right, there were no ESL programs in small Nebraska farming towns in the 1920s, no bilingual education specialists, no carefully structured cultural transition systems, no support groups helping immigrant children navigate identity and language barriers. Very true, very true. But I'm wondering, like, maybe it was easier back then because everything went like more naturally. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, I don't know. I think that there was a great inherent knowledge that you had to learn quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I even personally myself, I can say the first time that I went to the Czech Republic, I went with, I started the trip with my Czech professor from the University of Nebraska, and she was my guide through Prague and part of Bohemia, and I didn't have to worry about talking because she did all the talking for me. She was a native and took care of me. But when we parted ways and I got on the train to go to Moravia to visit some of my family that still lives there, I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm on my own and I better figure this out really quick. Although, there's a whole lot of English that's available in the Czech Republic in this modern day. And most people in shops, whatever, before I could even say anything, had pinpointed me as an American and automatically spoke to me in English. But it was still that feeling like I better be on my toes and learn the language and learn how to assimilate really quickly here because there's nobody to take care of me. And I think that's probably how my grandfather felt, even at 5 or 6 years old, that I don't have mom and dad to take care of me anymore and hold my hand. I got sent to school with my lunch pail, and I have to learn to take care of myself.
That's a good point. And then, after this would happen, after the great grandpa made the decision of like not speaking in Czech, uh, how did the Czech culture still live in the family? Because, you obviously are still, you're like the fourth generation and you still have like, the interest into it. Like usually they say, the different theories about immigration say like it usually dissolves within the third fourth generation, that they kind of know where they are coming from, but they kind of lose the language, they lose the traditions. So just tell me, how did it survive in your specific family?
Um, well, I'm the third generation, and
Mm-hmm.
so my grandfather was the firstborn son. My father was the firstborn son, first of the second generation, and I'm the firstborn son and first grandchild, cousin, anything on the third generation. So I think that continuity of the first of each generation has speaks a lot because I think they're kind of the keepers of the flame more than the fourth or fifth brother or sister and down the line. But in our family, it's survived through recipes, through cooking, through music. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so just it sounds cliche, but even the small things like baking kolache and um, going to a polka dance are things that even my brothers and cousins feel like they're connected to the family lineage that way.
Okay, and when you mention music, you are a musician. Was it also always like within the family? Did your grandpa and great grandpa play an instrument?
They did. Both my great grandfather and my grandpa were accordion players, uh, harmonica in Czech, and my grandpa actually had his own polka band for several years. My father was a music teacher for his career,
Mm-hmm.
and I followed in line that I also became a musician and have played for the majority of my life.
So when you say polka band, we living here, we know what it is, but people in the Czech Republic who don't know what polka band is, could you describe what kind of music is? Like, what's the tradition of polka bands in America?
um, so most of them, uh, Czech listeners from Czech Republic would be familiar with decovka music, um, brass band. Um,
Like dechovka, we call it
Decovka,
dechovka.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
Decovka. Like groups like Moravanka that were have been famous throughout Czech lands for several decades now. The polka band in America was a derivative of that. Most small farming towns did not have 10, 15, 20 musicians that could play in a large ensemble
Mm-hmm.
like that. But they might have a person that played accordion, a person that played tuba, one that played clarinet, maybe, and they would find three or four musicians and arrange music in the Dekovka tradition, um, and play the Czech folk songs, play that kind of music for local farm dances, local areas. And so there's a great tradition of that, especially
And so,
in
do you remember like any song like from the times of like even like your grandpa would play? Like, what would be the first song that you would remember, the Czech song?
um, so one of his favorites was in English. It's called the "When We Parted" waltz. I think in Czech it's Kadish Shelovat, I think.
That,
Um,
I don't know that one at all.
but
It's okay.
another one was "Long Road to Praha." That there is just Kolina, Kolina. So
Yeah.
there is just a whole that was in my blood, even from before I was able to talk. I have these memories of being a baby, a toddler, a little boy, being brought along to the polka dances that my dad and grandpa played, and just sitting there by the stage and having all this music absorb into my very soul, into my very being, and it's part of me. That was my first exposure really to Czech culture.
And when I saw the polka bands here for the first time, and I came here to the US when I was like 25, so when I saw it, I was very much surprised because I didn't expect that the Czech people in US would be connected to something like like that we in back home we consider as music for the retired people, for old people. But here, when I saw it for the first time and I saw like young people dancing on that music and really enjoying it, that was very surprising for me. So, is it still alive like that in the area where you are? And if you play in a polka band, so who is your crowd? Who is listening to you?
It's everybody from 2 years old to 99 or 100 years old. I think it's very interesting um, that Czechs in America, like I said previously, most of them immigrated here between 1880 and 1910. And because of the world wars, because of communism, because there's a blockade between America and the Czech lands for so many years that I think we got stuck in a time warp here in America. that the Czech culture that we associate with, that we are proud of, that we celebrate in America, is really Czech culture from 1900, 1910. And so when people like you come and you're like, this is not, this is what my grandparents listened to, or this is,
Exactly.
because we haven't kept up with modern Czech. And even when I studied at the University of Nebraska, we would have Czech students, foreign exchange students, come every year and study at the university. And there was a year-long program they could come study. And part of what we did is I helped take them to some of the small Nebraska Czech towns, and they would talk to some of the people there that were 80, 90 plus years at the time. And they said, well, yeah, your Czech is really good, but it's like we don't even recognize some of the words because they were speaking Czech as they knew it, or as their parents or grandparents taught them from 1875, 1880. And so we're stuck in this time warp in America, and it's a really interesting phenomenon.
It absolutely is, and I've never had a chance to speak to anybody from your region, but I experienced something similar in Romania, where is a region called Banat, which is a region where people from back then, Austrian Hungarian Empire, moved they were getting free land, so it was kind of similar situation. And it's very well known now for Czechs, and a lot of people start traveling there in early 90s, and they keep traveling there because it's a very unique region of couple of villages where it's the same situation where the people, speak of a language, of the Czech language of like 19th century.
Yes.
So I exactly know what you're talking about. Yeah. Very cool. Well, you mentioned the University of Nebraska, which is a university that offers, how is it called? Like Bohemian studies or Czech studies?
It's a Czech language program, and it's actually the oldest continuous Czech language program of any American institution, of any American university. It was established in, I believe, 1910, and there has been Czech classes taught continuously every semester at the University of Nebraska since 1910.
And you studied there, right? You
I
finished.
did. They offer a minor in Czech language, which I was able to finish and have as part of my degree in music. But it's very, very active, very immersive Czech language program that Nebraska is able to offer. They have a Komensky Club that has been in existence there, which is actually has been very supportive of the Czech governments in exile, the Czechoslovak government in 1989, and then now through the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And it's just it's been nationally, internationally awarded group.
And you also won the Gratias Agit award
We
for,
did.
for some activities that you were part of it. Like, what was it exactly?
In 2005, the Czech government awarded the University of Nebraska Komensky Club the Gratias Agate Award in recognition of all the support that the university and the club had given to the Czech Republic from 1910 onwards. We was monetary support, it was political support, on and on. And I was literally standing on the shoulders of giants that came before me. And but we were able to go to my professor and I were able to go to Prague and receive the award on behalf of the university and the club. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my whole life.
And we appreciate anybody like you who keep preserving the knowledge about the Czech communities over there, because it's something very special still, I think, because we are not a big nation, we are not like we are not very well known as immigrant communities here in the US, same like Italians or the German communities or Chinese later on, So like I think it's still very interesting. Like every time I talk about it with my American friends, they're always surprised and they have no clue actually that something like that exists here. So thank you for that. And I wanted to ask one more thing because we talked about your grandpa, your great grandpa. But what about the women's stories in your family? Like, did they also come from Europe? Is your grandma or great grandma from that part of the world
Uh,
also?
so my grandpa's mother, she was born an American, and I think that her family came from Bohemia very early on, maybe the 1850s, 1860s. And so by the time that she was born, she was already third generation American on
Okay.
his maternal side. Um, so I do have the records that go back on that side of the family too, but it's very almost surreal because um, her maiden name was Motis, and there's a cemetery in Nebraska here that I can go back and my great 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 grandparents are buried there, and it's
Oh,
almost kind of surreal to have three and four um, greats back to be buried, and to think the lineage and history, them coming even before Nebraska was a state, even before the American Civil War. Um, in America, our time, what we consider old is relative compared to what Europeans consider old. Um,
yeah.
we think that 1840, 1860 is, oh my gosh, that's really, really old. But then I go to Prague or Olomouc or Munich and I stand in cathedrals and churches that were built in 1100 or 900, and okay, now
That's true.
this is a whole nother level of old and antiquity here. So
Absolutely. And do you have any photos of her family also? Do you have anything from that side?
I do have some photos, and so I have not as much.
Mhm.
I don't think that I don't know if it's too long ago or they just didn't put any emphasis on saving things like the Svagera side did.
Of
But,
course.
I think of how many things, even birthday cards and letters that I might get in the mail today, and I don't always save them from year to year. They sit on the piano for a while and then they get thrown out. And I think, well, should I
Of
save
course.
those for future generations?
I know what you mean. I know. Well, I would be so happy if you could share some of those with me that I can actually share with everybody who is listening to our interview today because
Absolutely.
I think it really shows so much more about the whole story when you see the old photos and you can imagine the faces. So I would love if you could share that with me. And thank you so much for the interview, for sharing the story. And, I would also like to share the link to your blog because you have many more texts, of course. So if you please tell the name now, and also I will share it in the comment and on my social media. So what's your blog's name?
So my blog is Food for the Way, and can be found at foodfortheway.com. And it's I have many, I don't know how many, reflections on family, on faith, on Czech heritage, just a lot of feelings and thoughts that I want to share with the world.
Yeah, well, thank you, CJ. Thank you so much. And before I say goodbye, I just like to read a little more from your text
Sure.
uh, to just, finish about what we shared today together. Today, much of that old South Omaha Czech world has faded. Newspapers are gone, Sokol Hall has been sold, the language is seldom heard, but the echoes remain. Sometimes they remain in the old family stories, in recipes passed down through generations, perhaps in a surname. And sometimes in a forgotten newspaper clipping where a man named Jan Svagera once stepped onto a stage and helped carry an entire people forward, one spoken word at a time. So even though it's fading out, it's still there, and at least for us, the Czechs here, we know immediately from a last name,
Yes,
seeing, seeing on TV or in the local newspapers or even in books, we know what it means for
absolutely.
the US and for the Czech immigration here. So
Yeah.
thank you again, and hopefully, there will be more people like you that we can actually share and hear more stories about the Nebraska Czech heritage. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
And thank you everyone who listened and who watched this interview. Again, you guys can you can subscribe here on YouTube or on my channel on Patreon. I will put the link, of course, down in the comments. And thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye.